The Mafia boss stormed into the burning church. I begged him to leave. He refused to go without me. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. The night had already descended over the city, but the chaos inside the church was far from over. The flames of the fire twisted like serpents, licking the wooden beams that once held the building's grand structure together. The air was thick with the scent of smoke and burning incense, a strange blend that made it hard to breathe. My heart raced as I stumbled over the uneven stone floor, my body shaken by fear and the heat of the fire creeping closer. I could hear the crackling of the fire, growing louder with each passing second, as if the building itself was fighting to stay alive. The thick smoke made it nearly impossible to see, but I could still make out the faint outlines of the pews, now charred and broken, scattered across the floor. I reached out, my fingers brushing the cold stone walls, desperately searching for an exit. My lungs burned as I gasped for air, but I couldn't find a way out. That's when I saw him. The figure appeared like a shadow against the flickering flames, tall, powerful, and unafraid. His silhouette was unmistakable, his presence commanding and undeniable. It was him, the Mafia boss. I had never expected to see him here, not in this place, not in the middle of a fire. I had heard the rumors, the whispers about his ruthless nature, the way he ruled his empire with an iron fist. But seeing him standing there, in the midst of this hellish inferno, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of awe. "Get out of here," I shouted, my voice hoarse from the smoke. "It's too dangerous. You need to leave now." But he didn't move. Instead, he looked at me with those cold, calculating eyes, as if the fire around us was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. "No," he said, his voice calm and steady despite the chaos surrounding us. "I'm not leaving without you." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. The reality of the situation hit me harder than the heat of the flames. This man, this Mafia boss, was not only here, but was determined to get me out of this burning church. My heart skipped a beat, and for a moment, I was frozen in place. I didn't know what to say, what to do. I had never been in a situation like this before. The fire was getting worse by the second, and yet, he was so calm, so composed. His hands reached out to me, and for a moment, I hesitated. I wanted to run, to escape, but there was something in his gaze, something that made it impossible to move. "You're not going anywhere without me," he said again, his voice unwavering. And before I could protest, he was beside me, his arm around my waist, pulling me toward him. "Let go of me," I cried, trying to break free from his grip, but his hold was unyielding. I didn't understand. Why was he doing this? Why was he risking everything for me? The flames roared behind us, and I could feel the heat intensifying. There was no time left, but he wasn't going to let me go. I could feel his strength, his determination, as he guided me through the smoke and chaos, moving with a purpose that was almost unnatural. I felt helpless in his arms, but strangely, I also felt safe. There was something about him, something that made me trust him, despite everything I had heard. As we finally made it outside, the cool night air hit my face, and I took a deep breath, the smoke still lingering in my lungs. I turned to look at him, to ask him why he had come for me, why he hadn't left. But before I could speak, he said something that I would never forget. "You belong to me now." His words echoed in my mind as he walked away, leaving me standing in the cold night, my heart still racing from the events that had just unfolded. The Mafia boss stormed into the burning church. I begged him to leave. He refused to go without me. After the fire had finally been put out and the night had quieted, I found myself standing in front of him, unable to process what had just happened. The flames, the chaos, his unflinching decision to stay and rescue me. It was all a blur. The moment we stepped outside, the cool night air hit me like a wave of relief, but it did nothing to calm the storm of confusion inside me. He stood there, his dark eyes scanning the night, his face as stoic as ever. His words, "You belong to me now," kept echoing in my mind, each repetition adding to the weight of the reality I was trying to grasp. I was safe, but at what cost? Who was this man, really? Why was he risking everything for me? I had never asked for this. I had never asked for him. I had heard the rumors about Mafia bosses, about their ruthless ways and the lives they destroyed. But standing here now, with him, all of that seemed irrelevant, like a distant memory from a different world. Are you going to stand there all night? His voice cut through my thoughts, deep and commanding. I turned to face him, my heart still racing from the fire, from the fear, from everything that had happened in the last few hours. He looked at me with those same cold eyes, but there was something else there too. Something unreadable, something I couldn't quite place. You should get some rest, he said, his tone softer now, almost concerned. I'll have my men take you somewhere safe. Safe. I repeated, the word tasting foreign on my tongue. Safe was not what I had felt moments ago in the church, and it certainly wasn't what I felt standing in front of this man. Where are you taking me? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. His lips curled into a small, almost imperceptible smile. My estate, he said simply. It's the only place I can trust right now. The mention of his estate sent a shiver down my spine. I had heard of it, of course. The rumors about his wealth, his power, his influence. But I never imagined I would be going there. Not like this, not under these circumstances. I don't need your protection, I replied, my voice shaky but firm. I can take care of myself. He raised an eyebrow, and for a moment, I thought he might laugh. Instead, his expression remained serious. I'm not asking, he said, his tone sharp. It's not a request. My heart skipped a beat. There was no negotiating with him. I had known that from the moment I laid eyes on him. I didn't know what kind of game he was playing, but I knew I didn't have a choice. As much as I wanted to refuse, to turn away and find my own way, I was in too deep now. And somehow, despite everything, a part of me, an unwilling part, trusted him. I had no idea why. He motioned for one of his men, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a hard look in his eyes, to approach. Take her to the car, he ordered. Make sure she's comfortable. The man nodded and turned to lead me to a sleek black SUV parked at the curb. I hesitated for a moment, my mind racing with questions I had no answers to. But in the end, I followed him, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the empty street. I glanced back once, half expecting the Mafia boss to follow, but he remained where he stood, his gaze never leaving me. The car was quiet, the interior cool and dimly lit. I climbed inside and sank into the leather seat, my mind a whirlwind of thoughts I couldn't process. What did he want from me? Why had he come for me in the first place? And most importantly, why did I feel this strange pull toward him, despite everything that had happened? As the car started moving, I glanced out the window at the city fading behind me, the flames of the church still dancing in my memory. The world I knew was slipping away, replaced by something darker, something far more dangerous. And yet, I couldn't bring myself to feel entirely afraid. In the back of my mind, I knew that this was just the beginning of something far more complicated than I could ever have imagined. The Mafia boss had saved me, yes, but in doing so, he had also trapped me. And now, I had no choice but to face the consequences of that decision. The Mafia boss stormed into the burning church. I begged him to leave. He refused to go without me. The car sped through the streets, the city lights flickering by. In a blur, I barely noticed the passing scenery, my mind still reeling from everything that had happened. The fire, the chaos, the man who had come to my rescue. I looked out the window, unable to shake the image of him, standing tall and unfazed, as if nothing in this world could touch him. The way he had pulled me from the fire without a second thought, his cold eyes scanning the horizon as if the inferno was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. Who was he? Why had he risked everything to save me? The questions swirled in my head, unanswered, as the car turned onto a quiet street. The tall iron gates loomed ahead, their intricate design reflecting the faint glow of the streetlights. As we passed through, I caught sight of the sprawling mansion beyond the gates. It was nothing like I had ever imagined. The estate looked like something out of a movie, grand, imposing, and unmistakably powerful. It was clear that this man, this Mafia boss, was no ordinary criminal. This was a world of wealth, of power, a world where rules didn't apply to him. The car slowed as we approached the mansion, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding wash over me. I had no idea what I was walking into, but deep down, I knew I couldn't escape. I wasn't sure if I even wanted to. The car stopped in front of the mansion's grand entrance, and the driver opened the door for me. I stepped out, my legs feeling like they might give way at any moment. I hadn't realized how exhausted I was, how much the night's events had taken out of me. Before I could take another step, I heard his voice. "Come," he said simply, his tone commanding as always. I turned to face him, standing by the door with that same impassive expression. He wasn't looking at me, but at the mansion ahead, as if this was just another part of his daily routine. "Is this your home?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "It is," he replied, his eyes meeting mine for the first time since we left the church. There was something unreadable in his gaze, something that made my chest tighten. He didn't seem like the type of man who would offer an explanation, and yet there was an unspoken understanding between us. I was here now, and I would have to live with whatever came next. He led me inside, and as I stepped over the threshold, the enormity of the place hit me. The marble floors gleamed under the soft lighting, and the high ceilings gave the impression of a space that was both vast and suffocating. It felt like I had just stepped into another world, one that I didn't belong in, but one that I was now a part of. "I want you to stay here tonight," he said, breaking the silence. His words were simple, but they carried weight. "I'll have someone show you to your room." Before I could respond, one of his men appeared at his side, a silent figure in a dark suit. "Follow him," he instructed, nodding toward the man. I had no choice but to obey. I followed the guard down a long corridor, my footsteps echoing in the empty space. The house was eerily quiet, the only sound the soft padding of my shoes on the marble floors. The guard stopped in front of a large door, which he opened without a word. I stepped inside, and the room took my breath away. It was luxurious, but in a way that felt distant, cold. The bed was large, draped in rich, dark fabrics, and the furniture was all polished wood, carefully placed to create an atmosphere of opulence. There were no personal touches, nothing that made it feel like home. It was a space meant for someone else, someone who didn't need comfort, but control. "You'll be safe here," the guard said, his voice breaking my thoughts. "Is there anything you need?" I shook my head, not trusting my voice. He nodded, as if he understood, and left the room, closing the door behind him. I was alone. The silence in the room felt oppressive, the weight of the night pressing down on me. I didn't know what was worse, being trapped in this mansion with a man I barely knew, or being alone with my thoughts, trying to make sense of what had happened. My mind kept drifting back to him, the Mafia boss. He had saved me, yes, but at what cost? I had heard stories about men like him, men who ruled with power and fear. But there was something different about him, something that made me wonder if there was more to his story than I could ever understand. And as I lay down on the bed, my body too tired to stay awake any longer, I knew that this was only the beginning of a much darker journey. The Mafia boss stormed into the burning church. I begged him to leave. He refused to go without me. I woke up the next morning in the cold, sterile room that had been given to me. The mansion was eerily quiet, too quiet. The soft hum of the air conditioning was the only sound that filled the space. I had tried to sleep, but sleep never came. The events from the previous night kept replaying in my mind. Images of the burning church, the chaos, the man who had pulled me from the flames. I still couldn't wrap my head around it. Who was he? Why had he come for me? And why had he said those words? "You belong to me now?" I wasn't sure if he had meant them as a threat or as some twisted form of protection. Either way, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was caught in something much bigger than myself. I sat up in the bed, my body still aching from the exhaustion of the night before. I tried to stand, but my legs felt weak, unsteady. It was as if everything that had happened had drained the life out of me, leaving me a shell of the person I once was. I couldn't stay in this room forever, though. I had to face the man who had brought me here, the man who had saved me. But there was more to him than that. He wasn't just some ordinary person. He was something else, something dangerous. The door opened, and a man entered. He was tall, with dark hair and sharp features. His black suit seemed to swallow him whole, making him appear even more intimidating. He was one of the Mafia boss's men, I assumed. "He wants to see you," the man said in a low, monotone voice. "Follow me." I hesitated for a moment, my heart racing in my chest. Part of me wanted to refuse, to tell him I wasn't going anywhere. But the other part, the part that was terrified of what would happen if I didn't obey, pushed me forward. I followed him down the long, dark hallway, my footsteps echoing in the silence. I had no idea where I was going, but I felt like I was being led into the lion's den. The hallway ended at a large door. The man knocked once, then opened it without waiting for a response. Inside, the Mafia boss sat behind a massive desk, his posture straight and commanding. His dark eyes met mine the moment I stepped into the room. He was dressed in a suit that probably cost more than my entire apartment, and yet, he looked completely at ease in the extravagant surroundings. There was no fear in him, no hesitation. He was a man who knew exactly what he wanted. "Sit," he commanded, his voice low and steady. I did as he asked, my body moving on its own. I couldn't look away from him, couldn't ignore the intensity in his gaze. There was something magnetic about him, something that drew me in despite the fear that twisted in my stomach. He watched me for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, without saying a word, he reached into the drawer of his desk and pulled out a thick folder. He opened it slowly, his fingers gliding over the pages with practiced ease. "I've been watching you," he said, his voice breaking the silence like a knife through the air. My heart skipped a beat. "Watching me?" I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. He nodded, his eyes never leaving mine. "You think I don't know who you are? What you've been through?" I swallowed hard, my throat dry. I had no idea where this conversation was going, but I could feel the weight of it pressing down on me. "I've seen your records," he continued, his tone casual, as if he were discussing something trivial. "Your parents, your work, your struggles. You're not as invisible as you think." My chest tightened. How did he know all of that? What kind of man was he to have access to that information? The fear in me intensified, but I forced myself to keep calm. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing as he studied me. "Because I'm offering you something," he said slowly. "Something that no one else can give you." I felt a chill run down my spine. "And what is that?" I asked, dreading the answer. He smiled, but it was not a warm smile. It was cold, calculated. "Protection," he said simply. "I can offer you safety. A life without fear, without the constant struggle. All you have to do is accept it." My mind raced. I had never been offered anything like this before. Safety, security, things I had dreamed of but never thought possible. But what was the catch? "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He leaned forward, his gaze never leaving mine. "You," he said. "I want you to stay with me, to be by my side. I can protect you, but you have to trust me, and you have to stay." His words hung in the air, heavy and final. My heart raced as I processed what he was saying. This was not just an offer of protection. It was an ultimatum. I was being given a choice: stay with him, accept his protection, or leave and face whatever danger awaited me. I had no idea what I was getting myself into, but one thing was certain: I couldn't leave now. I had already come too far. "You'll stay then?" he asked, his voice smooth, almost too calm. I looked at him, my mind a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. The fire, the church, the night we had just survived. Was this truly my only option? Was this the only way to stay safe? "Yes," I said quietly, my voice shaking. "I'll stay." He smiled, and this time, there was a flicker of something softer in his eyes. "Good," he said. "Welcome to my world." The Mafia boss stormed into the burning church. I begged him to leave. He refused to go without me. The days that followed felt like I was walking through a haze. The mansion, which had once seemed cold and imposing, slowly began to feel like a prison. Every room I entered was grand, but each step only led me deeper into his world. The luxury of it all didn't comfort me. Instead, it made everything more unsettling. I had agreed to stay, to trust him, but every part of me still resisted. The man who had saved me from the fire was not the same man who now held power over me in his mansion. His presence was suffocating, but undeniable. The tension between us was palpable, yet neither of us spoke of it. Instead, I spent my days locked away in the room he had given me, pacing, trying to make sense of what had happened. It was not the safety I had imagined. It felt more like being caged, but I couldn't leave. The fear of what awaited me outside was stronger than the fear of staying with him. I hadn't seen him much in the days following the fire. The few times we crossed paths, his eyes were distant, unreadable, as if he were guarding some part of himself he wasn't ready to share. It was maddening. I wanted answers, but he was never forthcoming. The more time I spent in the mansion, the more I noticed the hidden details, the signs that I wasn't the only one who had been trapped here. There were no windows in the hallways, only grand paintings that seemed to watch me as I passed. The guards who walked the halls moved silently, as if they were part of the decor. It was a world of controlled silence, where secrets lived behind every corner. I wanted to rebel, to shout at him, demand to know why he had saved me, why he wouldn't let me go, but every time I looked into his eyes, I found myself speechless. His presence held a quiet command that stilled the words in my throat. It was as if he could silence me with a glance. One evening, after dinner, when I had almost given in to the suffocating silence of it all, he approached me. His footsteps echoed in the vast hallway as he walked toward my room. The moment he entered, I felt a shift in the air. The calmness of his demeanor was replaced with something I couldn't quite place, a tension that wrapped around both of us like a storm on the verge of breaking. "You're wondering why you're here," he said, his voice steady, as if he had read my thoughts. I didn't respond. I couldn't. My throat was tight, but I nodded slightly. He moved closer, his presence overwhelming. "You belong to me, yes, but that isn't all there is to it," he continued. "I saved you because I need you, and because you are the key to everything." I looked up at him, confused, unsure of what he meant. "The key?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "To what?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked over to the window, looking out into the night. His back was turned to me, but the silence between us was loud enough to fill the room. "You're not the only one with a past," he said finally, his voice low. "I made a promise to someone I lost. A promise to protect what's mine, to protect you. The life I lead isn't one you can walk away from." His words hung in the air like a threat, but I didn't know what he meant. I wanted to ask him, to scream at him to tell me everything, but I couldn't bring myself to. There was something about the way he spoke, something in the way his presence commanded the room that kept me rooted to the spot. I was trapped, yes, but I also felt a strange pull toward him. Despite everything, despite the fear and the danger, I found myself wanting to trust him. "What are you saying?" I managed to ask, my heart pounding in my chest. "I'm saying," he said, turning to face me, his eyes dark with something I couldn't understand, "that you don't have a choice anymore. You're mine. But I'll protect you. I'll make sure you're safe, as long as you stay with me." My breath caught in my throat. The way he said it, the weight of his words, it was like a promise and a warning all at once. I didn't know what to do with that. I didn't know what to feel. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice shaky. "I want you to stay," he said simply. "I want you to be mine. But in return, I'll keep you safe. No one will touch you. No one will hurt you." The words felt suffocating, as if they were closing in around me, leaving no room for escape. I wanted to leave, to run, but I knew I couldn't. Not anymore. "I don't know if I can do this," I whispered, the truth of my feelings slipping out before I could stop them. "You don't have a choice," he replied. His voice softened then, just slightly, as if he understood the turmoil inside me. "But you will. In time, you'll understand." He stepped closer to me, his presence towering over me as his hand reached out to gently touch my face. "Trust me. You'll see. No one will hurt you again." The way he said it, the way his eyes locked onto mine, it was impossible to ignore. For the first time, I wasn't sure if I wanted to. The Mafia boss stormed into the burning church. I begged him to leave. He refused to go without me. Days passed, and I still felt like a stranger in a world I never asked to be a part of. His mansion, once a place of imposing luxury, now felt like a cold, suffocating cage. Despite the opulence surrounding me, the quiet tension between us hung in the air, thick and unspoken. He had told me I was safe, but I wasn't sure what that really meant. His protection came with an invisible price, and the more I stayed here, the more I felt like I was losing myself. His words replayed in my mind. "You belong to me now." It wasn't just a statement. It felt like a chain, slowly but steadily tightening around me. I had agreed to stay, to trust him, but every part of me was still on edge. What had I gotten myself into? The days were long and uneventful, but the silence was deafening. I spent most of my time in the grand, empty rooms, trying to get used to the mansion and the strange new life I had been thrust into. The guards never left my side, always watching, always waiting. They never spoke to me, never offered anything but their cold, impassive presence. At times, I would catch myself staring out the window, wondering if I was ever going to escape. I missed my old life, my freedom, my ability to make decisions for myself. But I knew, deep down, that I had no choice. The Mafia boss, with all his power, had ensured that. I hadn't seen him much during the days that followed. The few times we crossed paths, his gaze was distant, calculating. It was as if he were always 2 steps ahead, always in control, while I was left to wonder about everything. The man who had saved me from the fire now seemed more like a stranger, an enigma, with a past that I could never fully understand. I had questions, so many questions, but I knew, better than to ask. He wasn't the type of man who liked to explain himself. Then, one evening, he appeared at my door, as if summoned by the very thoughts I had been trying to push away. He was dressed in a black suit, his usual air of power and confidence surrounding him like a shield. "Come with me," he said, his voice smooth, but with an edge of command that I could never ignore. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of what was happening, but I followed him, my steps slow and reluctant. He led me down the familiar halls, his presence suffocating, until we reached a small, private study tucked away from the rest of the mansion. The room was dimly lit, with bookshelves lining the walls and an ornate desk in the center. He motioned for me to sit, and I did, my heart pounding in my chest. "I've been patient with you," he said, his tone serious. "But we need to talk." I looked at him, my mind racing. What could we possibly talk about? I was still trying to understand why he had brought me here in the first place. Why me? Why did he save me? "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. His eyes locked onto mine, and for the first time, I saw something soft, almost vulnerable in them. "I want you to understand," he said, his voice low and steady. "I didn't save you out of some misguided sense of charity. I saved you because you're important to me, and because I made a promise that I intend to keep." My chest tightened. I didn't know what he was talking about. A promise? To whom? He continued before I could ask. "I know you don't understand this world, but you will. And when you do, you'll realize that you're safer here, with me, than you ever were on your own." I wanted to argue, wanted to tell him that I didn't need him, that I could survive without his protection. But something in the way he spoke, something in the way he looked at me, made me hesitate. He wasn't like the others. He wasn't just some cold, heartless Mafia boss. There was more to him, something deeper, something that I couldn't quite understand. "What do you need me to do?" I asked, my voice steady despite the fear rising in my chest. He smiled slightly, as if he had been waiting for me to ask that question. "I need you to stay," he said simply. "I need you to trust me. And when the time comes, you'll understand why. You're part of this now. There's no going back." His words were like a weight, heavy and final. I didn't know what he meant, but I knew that I was already in too deep to back out. The choice had already been made the moment I walked through that door. I didn't have the strength to fight him, not anymore. And as much as I wanted to leave, part of me knew that I couldn't. Not without losing everything. "Okay," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "I'll stay." His expression softened just slightly, a flicker of something, satisfaction, maybe, passing through his eyes. "Good," he said, his voice calm. "That's all I need to hear." And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving me alone in the room, my heart heavy with the weight of the decision I had just made. The Mafia boss stormed into the burning church. I begged him to leave. He refused to go without me. The days that followed were a blur of uncertainty. I had made my decision. I had agreed to stay, to trust him, but nothing felt certain. Every corner of the mansion was a reminder that I was now a part of something far bigger than myself. The guards who watched over me, the servants who barely looked at me. Everything about this life screamed control, and yet, I was the one who had allowed myself to be pulled deeper into it. I tried to maintain some semblance of independence, but every time I looked at him, the Mafia boss, I felt something shift inside me. He was always there, his presence never far from me. Even when he wasn't physically by my side, his influence loomed over every moment. At night, I would lie awake, unable to sleep, thinking about what he had said. "You belong to me now." His words were like a constant weight, pressing down on me. Part of me wanted to rebel, to scream at him, to demand answers, but the other part of me, the part that was terrified, told me to stay silent. One evening, after dinner, when I could no longer stand the suffocating silence. I decided to confront him. I found him in his private study, the room dimly lit by the soft glow of a desk lamp. He was reading something, his focus completely absorbed in the papers before him. I stood in the doorway for a moment, gathering my thoughts, but he was the one to speak first. "You're upset," he said, his voice calm and knowing, like he could sense every storm brewing inside me. I didn't respond at first. I couldn't. His ability to read me, to know what I was thinking before I even said anything, was unsettling. I stepped into the room, my resolve firming up with every step. "I need answers," I said, my voice shaking but determined. "Why am I here? Why did you save me?" He set the papers down and looked up at me, his eyes dark, but there was something softer in them this time. He didn't speak right away, but the silence between us felt heavy, filled with unspoken words. "You're important to me," he said finally, his tone steady. "I don't expect you to understand it now, but in time, you will." I swallowed hard, his words hitting me like a punch to the gut. Important to him? I had heard the rumors, of course, the stories about him, about how he ruled his empire with ruthless efficiency. But I had never imagined that I would somehow become a part of that world. "What do you want from me?" I asked, the question feeling like a confession. "What do you expect me to do?" He stood up then, moving toward me with a calm, deliberate pace. He didn't touch me, but the air around us seemed to thicken with the intensity of his presence. "I don't need you to do anything," he said softly. "Just trust me. That's all I ask." Trust. The word echoed in my mind, but I wasn't sure if I could trust him. I wasn't sure I could trust anyone in this world of power and lies. "You saved me," I said, my voice quieter now, my emotions getting the best of me. "But I don't know what you want from me. I don't know what you're asking for." He was silent for a moment, his gaze steady, almost searching. Then, without warning, he reached out, his hand brushing lightly against my cheek. It wasn't a gesture of power or dominance. It was tender, almost gentle, and it sent a shiver down my spine. "I want you to be safe," he said simply. "That's all." I felt the weight of his words, but I wasn't sure if I could believe them. How could I trust him when I had no idea who he really was? But in that moment, something inside me shifted. Maybe it was the way he looked at me, or maybe it was the way he made me feel, like I was the only thing that mattered in that moment. I wanted to push him away, to tell him that I didn't need him, that I could handle things on my own. But the truth was, I was scared. Scared of what would happen if I walked away from him, and scared of what would happen if I stayed. "I'm not a part of this world," I said, my voice shaking with uncertainty. "I don't belong here." He didn't respond right away, just looked at me with that steady, unwavering gaze. Then, finally, he spoke. "You belong here because you're mine," he said, his voice low and commanding. "And nothing will change that." His words were final, but there was something in the way he said them, something that made me feel like I had no choice but to accept it. Maybe I didn't belong in his world, but there was no going back now. I had already stepped too far into it, and somehow, despite my fear, I knew that I couldn't leave. I couldn't walk away from him. "You belong to me," he repeated, almost like a vow. I didn't know what that meant, not fully. But in that moment, as he stood before me, his presence enveloping me, I understood one thing. I was never going to be the same again. The Mafia boss stormed into the burning church. I begged him to leave. He refused to go without me. The days after my agreement to stay were a whirlwind of emotions I couldn't quite process. His mansion had become a prison, one that I had allowed myself to enter. There was no escape, not physically, not mentally. Despite all the grandeur surrounding me, it was the silence that suffocated me the most. I hadn't seen him much since our last conversation. He was a shadow that loomed over the mansion, his presence felt in every room, even when he wasn't physically there. The guards watched me, but I had begun to notice something different in their eyes. They were no longer just indifferent. They were wary, almost protective. I didn't know what it meant, but it unsettled me further. Each day I spent in this house, I felt myself being drawn into a world that wasn't mine, one that I didn't fully understand. I spent my time pacing the rooms, trying to distract myself with meaningless thoughts, but everything always came back to him. The Mafia boss. I couldn't stop thinking about him, about his words, about his touch. He had saved me. Yes, but for what purpose? What did he want from me? And why did I feel both terrified and comforted by his presence? One evening, as I sat by the window, staring out at the darkening sky, I heard his voice behind me. "You've been avoiding me," he said, his voice calm. But there was an edge to it, a slight tension in his words that I couldn't ignore. I didn't turn to face him. I couldn't. "I haven't been avoiding you," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. "I just need time." "Time for what?" he asked, his footsteps approaching, the sound of his shoes against the marble floor like a drumbeat. "Time to understand everything," I said, my voice shaking slightly. I could feel him close, feel the heat of his presence even though he wasn't touching me. "I don't understand why you're doing this." "Why me?" There was a brief silence before he spoke again, his voice softer this time, almost as if he were considering his words carefully. "You're here because I made a promise," he said. "A promise I intend to keep. To you, to her." My heart skipped a beat. "Her?" I asked, the question slipping out before I could stop it. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he walked closer, and I could feel the intensity of his gaze on me. "The woman I lost," he said after a long pause. "The one who meant everything to me. I promised her that I would protect what's mine. And you, whether you like it or not, are now mine." His words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I wasn't sure how to react. Part of me wanted to run, to get as far away from him as possible, but another part of me, the part one couldn't quite control, wanted to stay. "I don't understand," I said, my voice trembling. "You want me to replace her?" He was silent for a moment, and I could hear the faintest hint of pain in his breath as he exhaled. "No," he said finally, his voice low. "But I want you to understand that you're not here by mistake. You're part of something bigger now. You're tied to me in ways you don't even realize." I stood up then, turning to face him, my emotions swirling like a storm inside me. "I don't want this," I said, my voice shaking with a mixture of fear and anger. "I never asked for this. I never asked for you, for any of this." His eyes softened, just for a moment, before they hardened again. "It doesn't matter whether you asked for it or not," he said. "You're in this now, and there's no going back." His words hit me like a slap, the finality of them settling deep in my chest. I didn't know what to say, didn't know how to fight him. Part of me didn't want to. I couldn't deny the strange connection I felt to him, the way he made me feel safe, even when everything about him screamed danger. "I don't know what you want from me," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do." He took a step closer to me, his gaze never leaving mine. "You don't have to do anything," he said softly. "Just stay, trust me, and everything will fall into place." His words were like a promise, one that I didn't know if I could trust. But in that moment, standing in the quiet of his study, with the weight of his gaze on me, I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't walk away from him, not now. Not anymore. I had already been pulled too far into his world. And maybe, just maybe, I was beginning to realize that I didn't want to leave. The Mafia boss stormed into the burning church. I begged him to leave. He refused to go without me. The days after that conversation felt like walking on a razor's edge. I had agreed to stay, to trust him, but the more time I spent under his roof, the more tangled I became in his world. His mansion, once a place of cold grandeur, had become a world of secrets and expectations I couldn't escape. Despite everything he had said, I still couldn't understand what it was I had become a part of. I wasn't just living in a luxurious prison. I was living with the weight of a promise he had made to someone I didn't know, someone who had come before me. But even now, despite my confusion and fear, there was something I couldn't deny. He was a man of his word, and I was his. Every moment with him felt like a test of my resolve, but the strange pull between us kept me from pushing him away. It was as if, despite my resistance, I was meant to stay by his side. And the more I stayed, the more I realized that my life had shifted in ways I could never have predicted. I had learned to keep my distance, but there was a growing curiosity within me, a part of me that wanted to understand him better. I had no choice but to acknowledge it. He wasn't just the man who saved me from the fire. He was someone who had a powerful presence, a man whose influence reached far beyond the walls of his mansion. He wasn't someone I could ignore, no matter how hard I tried. It wasn't just his power that kept me in this place. It was the way he looked at me. Every time I thought I could push him away, every time I told myself I had no need for him, he would do something, say something, that made me question everything. I couldn't leave, and I couldn't let him go. That evening, I found myself alone in the garden, walking along the stone paths beneath the towering oaks. The air was cool, the faint sound of the wind rustling through the leaves. I thought I could escape my thoughts in the silence of the night. But of course, he found me. He always found me. "You're out here alone," he said, his voice deep and commanding. I turned to face him, feeling the familiar tension between us. "I needed some space," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady, but I knew I wasn't fooling him. His eyes, dark and intense, swept over me, his gaze never leaving mine. "You're not fooling anyone," he said softly, but there was something almost gentle in his tone. "You think you can just forget what happened? That you can walk away from this?" I didn't answer him. Instead, I turned my gaze back to the garden, my heart heavy with questions. "I'm not trying to forget," I said quietly, my voice almost a whisper. "I just don't understand what you want from me." He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "What I want from you is simple," he said. "I want you to trust me, and I want you to understand that there's no going back now. You're mine, and that means you're part of something much bigger than you realize." I swallowed hard, the weight of his words sinking in. I had thought I could resist him, thought I could remain an outsider in this world he had drawn me into. But now, standing in the garden with him, I realized that I had already been pulled in deeper than I could ever have imagined. "What does that mean?" I asked, my voice trembling despite myself. "What does it mean to be yours?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached out, his hand brushing lightly against my arm. The touch sent a shiver down my spine, and I found myself unable to move. "It means you're safe," he said, his voice low and steady. "No one can touch you, no one can harm you, as long as you're with me." There it was again, that promise he had made, the promise of safety, of protection, but I wasn't sure if I could trust it. And yet, in the back of my mind, I knew there was no one else who could offer me the same sense of security. But at what cost? I asked, my voice barely audible. He looked at me for a long moment, as if weighing his response. Then, with a softness I hadn't expected, he said, "At the cost of your freedom, yes. But in return, I give you my loyalty. I give you everything I have. That's what being mine means." I didn't know what to say to that. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with the weight of their implications. I had never been the type to depend on anyone, but in this moment, I couldn't deny the strange connection between us. "And what do you want from me in return?" I asked, my heart racing. "Nothing," he said, his voice almost reassuring. "I don't expect anything from you. But the choice is yours. Stay, and I'll protect you. Leave, and you'll be on your own. But understand this, no matter what you decide, you can't go back to the way things were." I stared at him, my mind a whirlwind of thoughts. I had no idea what my future would look like, no idea what would happen if I stayed. But in that moment, as I stood there with him, I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't walk away. Not now. Not after everything. I was already in too deep. "I'll stay," I said, the words escaping before I could stop them. And with that, I knew that my life would never be the same again. The Mafia boss stormed into the burning church. I begged him to leave. He refused to go without me. The days that followed were quieter, but no less tense. I had made my decision. I had chosen to stay with him, and that decision felt heavier with each passing hour. He had promised me safety, a life free from fear. But I couldn't ignore the feeling that, despite everything, I was still trapped in his world, a world where nothing was ever truly my own. I moved through the mansion like a shadow, never quite belonging, but always aware of his presence, watching me, guiding me, even when he wasn't around. His men, always nearby, watched my every move, their silent, calculating eyes following me through the house, through the hallways, into the garden. It wasn't the life I had imagined for myself, but in a strange way, it was becoming my reality. And somehow, I couldn't help but be drawn deeper into it. One evening, I found myself in his study again, sitting across from him at his desk, trying to understand my place in this strange, new world he had created. He had become a constant, his presence always looming, always near, like a force I couldn't escape. "You've been quiet lately," he said, his voice calm as he poured himself a drink. He looked at me, his eyes piercing, as if waiting for me to explain. I didn't know what to say. I couldn't put into words the storm inside me, the confusion, the fear, the desire to run, to escape. But a part of me knew that it was too late for that. "I'm just thinking," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. Thinking about what? He asked, his gaze unwavering. About everything, I said, my hands trembling slightly. About why I'm here, why you saved me, why I agreed to stay. He leaned back in his chair, watching me closely, as if studying me. You're here because I need you, he said, his voice steady. And you agreed to stay because deep down, you know you belong here, with me. You just don't want to admit it yet. His words hit me harder than I expected. I wanted to deny it, to tell him that he was wrong, that I didn't belong here, that I could leave whenever I wanted. But deep down, I knew he was right. I didn't belong in this world, but I had already been pulled into it. And somehow, I couldn't walk away. I don't know if I can do this, I whispered, my voice breaking. I don't know if I can live like this, under your control, under your watchful eye. His expression softened, just slightly, but I could still feel the weight of his presence. It's not control, he said, his voice low and reassuring. It's protection. I'm not watching you. I'm keeping you safe. You don't understand the danger out there, the enemies I've made. But I will protect you, no matter what. I looked at him, my heart pounding in my chest. I don't need your protection, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I can protect myself. He shook his head, his eyes filled with something I couldn't quite understand. No, you can't. Not in this world. You're mine now, and that means I will protect you with everything I have. You're safe as long as you're with me. But you need to trust me. His words, once again, hit me like a punch to the gut. Trust. It was the one thing I had never been able to give anyone. And now, he was asking me to trust him. To surrender to him, to his world. I didn't know if I could do that. But the way he looked at me, the way he spoke, made me question everything I had believed about myself. I had never been someone who relied on anyone, who let anyone control my life. But with him, with the Mafia boss, I was beginning to realize that my life wasn't entirely mine anymore. What do you want from me? I asked, my voice trembling. He stood up then, moving closer to me, his eyes never leaving mine. I want you to trust me, he said again, his voice soft but firm. I want you to be mine fully. Not just physically, but emotionally. I want you to accept the protection I'm offering. Accept the life I'm giving you. I'm giving you everything, but I need you to give me the same in return. His words were both a promise and an ultimatum, and I didn't know how to respond. I wanted to say no, to push him away, to fight him. But something inside me, something I didn't want to admit, was pulling me closer to him. I don't know if I can, I said quietly, my voice barely audible. I don't know if I can give you what you're asking for. He reached out, his hand gently brushing my cheek, his touch sending a jolt of electricity through me. You don't have to decide everything right now, he said softly. But know this, you are mine, and I will never let anyone hurt you. Not while I'm here. His words settled over me like a blanket, both comforting and suffocating at the same time. I didn't know what to do, what to feel. I didn't know if I was strong enough to stay in this world, to live under his control, to surrender to him. But one thing was clear, I was already in too deep. There was no going back. And somehow, despite everything, I couldn't bring myself to leave. The Mafia boss stormed into the burning church. I begged him to leave. He refused to go without me. The days that followed were a blur of silent tension and hidden emotions. His mansion, with its towering walls and darkened hallways, felt both like a sanctuary and a cage. I had made my choice. I had chosen to stay, to trust him, but the more time I spent with him, the more questions I had. Every step I took in this world, his world, led me deeper into a life I hadn't asked for. But there was something about him that kept me there. His presence was magnetic, his control undeniable. I didn't know if I should feel safe or afraid. But what I did know was this. I couldn't turn back now. The promise he had made, to protect me, to keep me safe, was beginning to feel like a double-edged sword. I had agreed to be his, but I was starting to wonder what that truly meant. He had told me that I would understand in time, but time felt like a luxury I didn't have. One evening, he found me standing by the large window in the library, looking out over the estate. The sun had just set, casting a golden glow over the sprawling grounds, but the beauty of it all didn't ease the knot in my stomach. I could feel his presence behind me before I even turned around. You look lost, he said, his voice smooth and steady, yet with an edge that told me he wasn't just referring to the view outside. I didn't turn to face him immediately. I didn't know how to respond. There was a growing tension between us that I couldn't shake, no matter how hard I tried. "I'm not lost," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm just trying to figure things out." He moved closer, his footsteps echoing in the quiet room. "Figuring things out?" he repeated, his voice tinged with amusement. "There's nothing to figure out. You're mine, and that's all there is to it." His words sent a shiver down my spine. "You think I'm just going to accept that?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly despite my best efforts to stay calm. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he placed a hand on the back of the chair next to me, his fingers brushing against the wood as he leaned in, his breath warm against my ear. "You already have," he said quietly. "The moment you agreed to stay, you accepted it. You belong to me. But I'm not asking for anything from you. Not yet. All I'm asking for is your trust." His words lingered in the air, heavy with meaning, and I felt the weight of them press down on me. Trust. It was the one thing I had never been able to give anyone. How could I trust him when I barely knew who he really was? How could I trust someone whose world was built on lies and power? "And if I don't trust you?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Then you'll be on your own," he said, his tone matter of fact. "But understand this. The world outside is not kind to people like you. You'll need protection, and that protection only comes with trust." I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell him that I didn't need his protection, that I could handle myself. But a part of me, the part one didn't want to acknowledge, knew that I couldn't. Not in this world. Not with the enemies he had made, the dangers lurking around every corner. "I don't know how to trust you," I said, my voice quiet, almost broken. "I don't know if I ever will." He stepped back slightly, his eyes never leaving mine. "You don't have to trust me right now," he said, his voice softer. "But I need you to understand that I'm not your enemy. I'm the one who's trying to protect you." I looked away, unable to meet his gaze any longer. There was so much I didn't understand, so much I couldn't grasp. But one thing was certain, I couldn't walk away from him. Not now. Not after everything that had happened. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He walked toward the window, his gaze sweeping over the estate. "Now, you learn to trust," he said, his tone distant but steady. "You learn to accept what you are in this world. And you stay by my side." His words sent a chill down my spine. But there was something in his tone, something in the way he spoke, that made me feel like this was just the beginning. "And if I don't?" I asked, almost afraid to hear the answer. He turned to face me, his eyes cold but unreadable. "Then you'll leave," he said. "And you'll face whatever comes for you alone." His words stung more than I expected. I wanted to fight back, to tell him I wouldn't be a part of his world, but something in his eyes told me I couldn't. I couldn't leave. Not anymore. I had already crossed a line, and there was no turning back. "I'll stay," I said finally, the words leaving my lips before I could stop them. "But I need to understand. I need to know what's really going on." He smiled slightly, a dark glimmer in his eyes. "You will. In time." And with that, the conversation was over. But for the first time, I felt like I had no choice but to follow him down this dark path. A path that, no matter how hard I tried to avoid it, seemed like my only option now. The Mafia boss stormed into the burning church. I begged him to leave. He refused to go without me. The next few days passed in a haze of uncertainty. I had made my choice, but it didn't feel like a decision at all. It felt more like a trap I had willingly walked into. The mansion, once imposing, had become both my refuge and my prison. The walls were adorned with fine art, and the marble floors gleamed under the chandeliers, but none of it gave me the sense of peace I had hoped for. Instead, I felt the weight of my choice pressing down on me with every step I took. I spent my days in silence, wandering the grand halls, but the silence never felt peaceful. The guards, always watching, always waiting, made sure of that. It was as though the mansion had eyes everywhere, following my every move. I had never felt so alone, even though I was surrounded by people. I had not seen him much, the Mafia boss. He remained distant, always in the background, like a shadow I couldn't quite shake. But I knew that he was there, always watching, always calculating. I tried to ignore him, tried to pretend that I could still walk away from this, but it was impossible. The pull of his world was too strong, and I was already too deep. One evening, after dinner, I was sitting alone in the study when he appeared. His presence filled the room, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. He walked toward me, his steps slow, deliberate. His eyes were cold, but there was something else in them too, something I couldn't quite place. "You've been avoiding me," he said, his voice steady, almost too calm. I didn't answer. What could I say? How could I explain that I wasn't avoiding him? I was avoiding what he represented. "I'm not avoiding you," I said finally, my voice soft. "I'm just trying to figure things out." He stopped in front of me, his gaze intense, searching. "There's nothing to figure out," he said, his voice low. "You're here because you're mine. And that's all there is to it." His words hung in the air like a final decree, but I wasn't sure if I could accept it. "I don't know if I can do this," I whispered, looking away. "I don't know if I can live like this, under your control, under your watch." He was silent for a moment, but when he spoke again, his voice was softer, almost gentle. "It's not control," he said. "It's protection. You don't understand the dangers in this world. You can't keep pretending like you're still the same person you were before. You're mine now, and that means you're part of this world. My world." I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to scream at him, to demand answers, to tell him I didn't want to be part of his world. But the other part of me, the part one couldn't ignore, wanted to stay. It wanted to trust him, to believe in the protection he offered. "What happens if I can't accept that?" I asked quietly, my voice barely audible. He didn't move, didn't say anything at first, but the weight of his gaze made me feel like I was standing on the edge of something I couldn't control. "Then you'll leave," he said softly, but with a finality that made my heart skip a beat. "But you won't last long out there. Not without me. I made a promise, and I'll keep it." His words were like a threat, but I couldn't deny the truth in them. I had already seen the dangers outside, the shadows that lurked in the corners of his world. I didn't know if I could survive without him, and the thought of being alone in this dangerous world terrified me. "I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do," I admitted, my voice shaking. "I don't know how to be part of this." He stepped closer, his hand reaching out to gently touch my arm. His touch was warm, and for a moment, it calmed the storm inside me. "You don't have to know everything right now," he said softly. "In time, you'll understand. All I'm asking is that you trust me." I looked up at him, searching his face for something, some sign that this was real, that this wasn't just some twisted game he was playing. But there was nothing in his eyes except certainty. "You're not asking for much, are you?" I said bitterly. "Just everything. My trust, my life, my future." He smiled slightly, but it wasn't a smile of amusement. It was something darker, something that told me he wasn't just offering safety. He was offering control, too. "I'm not asking for anything you don't already owe me," he said quietly. "You're mine, whether you want to be or not. The only choice you have is whether or not you accept it." His words cut through me like a blade, but I didn't have the strength to push him away. The truth was, I didn't want to push him away. A part of me wanted to stay, to let him protect me, to let him take care of everything. But another part of me, the part that had always been independent, resisted. "What if I can't accept it?" I whispered, barely able to get the words out. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped back, his gaze never leaving mine. Then, with a quiet intensity, he said, "Then you leave. But understand this, if you walk away, you're not just walking away from me. You're walking away from everything." The finality of his words left me breathless, and for the first time since I had agreed to stay, I realized there was no way out. There was no walking away from this. I was already too deep, and I was beginning to wonder if I ever truly wanted to leave. The Mafia boss stormed into the burning church. I begged him to leave. He refused to go without me. The days blurred into one another as I settled into my new life, a life I never imagined. I had made my choice, and now there was no turning back. The weight of that decision hung over me like a shadow I couldn't escape. He had kept his word. He protected me, kept me safe, but in doing so, he had pulled me deeper into a world I wasn't sure I could belong to. There was no denying the pull between us, the connection that kept me tethered to him, but it terrified me. He was everything I had never wanted, and yet, he was everything I found myself needing. The mansion had become my cage and my sanctuary, all at once. I had no place to go, no place I could truly call my own, and I was slowly beginning to realize that maybe that was what he had wanted all along. The protection he promised came with a cost, and that cost was my freedom. I had never been the type to rely on anyone, to allow anyone to have that much power over me, but with him, it was different. I couldn't explain it, but something in the way he looked at me, the way he held me close, made it impossible to walk away. One evening, after dinner, I found myself sitting alone in the library, staring out at the city lights. The sound of the fireplace crackling softly in the background did little to calm the storm inside me. I knew I had to make a decision. Either stay and accept the life he had offered, or walk away and risk losing everything. My thoughts were interrupted when I heard the familiar sound of footsteps approaching. I didn't need to look up to know it was him. His presence filled the room, and for a moment, I could barely breathe. "You're thinking too much," he said, his voice calm as always. I didn't answer, unsure of what to say. "You know you belong here," he continued, walking toward me, his steps steady, confident. "You're mine, and I'll make sure no one ever takes you from me." I turned to face him then, my heart pounding in my chest. "I never asked for this," I said, my voice trembling. "I didn't ask to be yours." He stopped in front of me, his eyes softening for just a moment, but his grip on me never wavered. "You didn't have to ask," he said quietly. "You're here because I made you mine. And you'll see, in time, that this is where you're meant to be." I wanted to argue, to push him away, but his words settled over me like a weight I couldn't lift. He was right. I was already too deep, and there was no way to go back. "I can't keep living like this," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Under your control, under your protection. I'm not who I was before. I'm not free." He reached out then, his hand gently brushing against my cheek. The touch sent a wave of warmth through me, but also a pang of something I couldn't quite define. "You are free," he said softly, his voice almost tender. "But you're not alone anymore. You don't have to carry the weight of the world by yourself. Not when you have me." I closed my eyes for a moment, the reality of his words sinking in. I had never needed anyone, but with him, I couldn't deny that I did. I needed him in a way that terrified me. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice trembling. He smiled then, a small, almost reassuring smile. "I want you to accept this. To accept me, to accept us. Together, we can do anything. You'll never have to fear again. I'll protect you." His words hung in the air between us, and for the first time, I realized that I couldn't imagine my life without him. "I don't know if I can trust you," I said, my voice shaky. "But I know I can't live without you." He stepped closer, his hand now resting on my shoulder, his touch warm and grounding. "Trust is something you'll learn in time," he said softly. "But know this, I'll never leave you. Not ever." And in that moment, I knew he was telling the truth. I had never been one to trust, but with him, I couldn't help it. There was something in his eyes, something in the way he held me, that made me believe that I was exactly where I needed to be. The decision had been made. There was no more running, no more doubting. I was his, and I was finally beginning to understand what that meant. I have always been a fan of dark romance, where mystery and intense emotions intertwine to create a story that keeps you hooked. In this gripping tale, the main character finds herself trapped in a world that is both alluring and terrifying. After a deadly fire, she is saved by a man who is more than he appears, a powerful figure in a dangerous world. As she struggles to understand her feelings and the life she's now a part of, she is drawn deeper into the web of dark romance. The tension between them builds as their bond grows, with every moment in his mansion leaving her questioning everything she thought she knew. With every passing day, she finds herself more entranced by him, even though she fears what might happen if she truly lets go and trusts him. This is a story about losing control and accepting the dark romance that pulls you in, no matter the consequences. As they navigate this twisted world together, the lines between love and power blur, leaving her with an impossible choice: to stay and embrace the life he offers, or to walk away and risk losing everything. The story unfolds in a world of wealth, power, and danger, where dark romance reigns and nothing is as it seems. Her journey takes her deeper into a world she can't escape, and with each step, the grip of the Mafia boss tightens. Will she give in to the pull of the dark romance between them, or will she find a way to escape his world? You won't want to miss this thrilling ride filled with twists, passion, and the undeniable allure of a dark romance that will keep you guessing until the very end.